Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at 2 Kings chapters 6 through 13 in our continuing study of the historical books. We pick up in chapter 6, verse 1. Now the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "Behold, now the place before you where we're living is too limited for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and each of us take from there a beam, and let us make a place there for ourselves where we may live." So he said, "Go." And then one said, "Please be willing to go with your servants." And he answered, "I shall go." So they're relocating to a location close to the Jordan. So he went with them. And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was falling, a beam, he's actually cutting down the tree, so making a beam. The axe head fell into the water, and he cried out and said, "Alas, my master, for it was borrowed. Nothing I hate more than borrowing somebody else's tools and then having something happen to it." And that's what takes place here. Then the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" And when he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. Now, iron doesn't normally float, so this is given as an obvious miracle, a very utilitarian miracle. Um, it's one that I'm not even sure what to do with. He said, "Take it up for yourself." So he put out his hand and took it. Now, notice in the story of the floating axe head, first of all, it's connected by geography to the previous narrative. Remember Naaman, the fellow from the captain of the king's guard from Aram, that is from the city of Damascus, who had come down and had been told, "Wash yourself in the Jordan 7 times." The way the Septuagint rendered it, "Baptize yourself in the Jordan 7 times." Well, here they are again by the Jordan in this story as well. So they're by the Jordan River, and the Jordan River both cures in the previous story. He washes and he is cured of his leprosy. And here the Jordan returns the axe head. It's sort of a friendly river in this case, where it's at least used that way by God. Both narratives are telling us of the power of God to heal, to do something as mundane as bring back an axe head that had been lost. The prophets then notice it starts with a story where they're relocating to a new place. The axe head is lost in the Jordan. A stick is cut and thrown into the Jordan, and then the axe head is recovered. That reminds us of something taking place on a larger scale where the prophets have been pointing to a new covenant. We're going to see that one, especially when we get to Jeremiah, that's coming up. And speaking of a Messiah who came for those who were lost, he died on the cross and was buried, thrown into that deep, dark place, the tomb. And he rose again from the third day. And those who believe are also restored, come back from the dead. So there's something enticing about the story. Now we come to verse 8, and we're back to Aram again, remember, with its capital at Damascus, where Naaman had come from. Now the king of Aram was warring against Israel. That's going to be the case. There's going to be a lot of warfare between Aram and Israel. And he, that is the king of Aram, counseled with his servants, saying, "In such and such a place shall be my camp." He's making his military plans. Now, some observations from this chapter, because what's going to happen is I'm sorry, Elisha is going to get involved. I have to be careful about the pronunciation. We're not talking about Elijah. He's already gone up to heaven via chariot. So we're talking Elisha. But some observations from the chapter. First of all, the kings are not mentioned by name. We have elsewhere, both before and after, where their names are mentioned, but not here. They're incidental to the story. The only person mentioned by name is Elisha, and of course, God. And they're the two main characters of this story. It's really the Lord who's at the center of attention. The Lord's going to be doing some things here. And note, we will see a reference to the attendant of the man of God. Remember who that was previously. That had been Gehazi. He's not mentioned by name here. He's just called the attendant of the man of God. And if that's all we had to go on, we think, well, had he retired because of his leprosy? But we're going to find out no. Later on, we're going to see him in chapter 8 by name. So he's still around. Now he's a leper, but he's still around. He's still active in the story. And notice the prayers that are going to be given in verses 17, 18, and 20. So this is going to be a lesson in prayer and a lesson in God's power. So we begin where Aram is at war with Israel, and the king of Aram finds out that he's making his plans. We're moving here, we're moving there, and everywhere he moves, Israel is ready for them because, as he finds out, Elisha has been prophesying and telling the king of Israel where the king of Aram is going. It's like having, it's sort of like having a spy in your midst, only he doesn't have to be in their midst. He can see no matter where he is, and the king of Aram is getting upset with him. So take out their intelligence corps by the name of Elisha. And so an attempt is made to arrest Elisha, and the power of God shows up where the soldiers that come to surround him and take him are blinded by God. And so he takes them by the hand and leads them, these soldiers that have been blinded, and this is not just like one or two, this is apparently a whole, I don't know if it's a company, forget exactly how many that are mentioned, but they are led by the hand, and when suddenly they can see again, they have Israelites around them, like the Israelite king and his army, and they could be killed. But he says, no, don't kill them, feed them and send them home. So the captives are fed, and then they are sent home. And that's the first part of the story. The next section, and it's still in the same chapter, we read that Aram is at war with Israel again. The king of Israel now puts a curse on Elisha because it's looking bad for Israel. And you say, well, why blame Elisha? Because, well, he had to have somebody to blame. You ever you ever know somebody like that? They've always got to blame somebody. Or if you don't know somebody like that, maybe look in the mirror. Maybe you are somebody like that. Um, uh, Oftentimes when things go wrong, we like to find out who the culprit is. And if we can't find one, we go looking for one. And that's what happens here. And so he puts a curse on Elisha, and there's an order to arrest Elisha by the king of Israel, not by the king of Aram. Everybody hates Elisha in the story. And again, the power of God shows up. And this time what happens is the city of Israel has been surrounded. And there's no way out because Aram is big and nasty, and it looks like they're here to stay. But the power of God shows up, and this time it's not by blinding somebody, it's by causing them to hear something. What do they hear? They hear the sounds of chariots, and they jump to the assumption, aha, the king of Israel must have hired two groups, the Hittites and the Egyptians. Now, the Hittites are way up north. They really hadn't, the Hittite Empire had been like in a long time previously. They hadn't been around for a while. And the Egyptians haven't really been attacking with, they're down in Egypt, but they haven't really been out. But they hear the sound, and it sounds like chariots, so they assume it must be chariots. And the army of Aram, which has been encamped around the Israelite city, they leave their camp and they run away. Um, and remember Gehazi the leper? Well, there's some lepers that are stationed outside. It's like they can't go into the city, but they can't go out of the city, and they're sort of stuck in the middle. And they think, well, let's just go surrender at the camp. The worst they can do is kill us. And they get there, and what has happened? There's an empty camp with the food all there. And look at this. We were starving to death because they had laid siege to the city. They were attempting to starve us out. And there's free food. Should we tell anybody? After a while, I guess we should tell them, and they do. And so the people now are fed, and it's a great story. So we have chapter 6 that started off, verse 8, with the king of Aram and Elisha. Next, we have a series of stories from chapter 6, verse 24, all the way to chapter 8 about the king of Israel and Elisha. And then before we're done, we're going to bring it back to the king of Aram again and Elisha. So the first story was where Elisha protects Israel. Remember, giving information. And Aram attempts, Aram is the king of Aram, that's king of Damascus, attempts to capture Elisha. And the Aramaic soldiers are captured, remember, because they're blinded, and then they're released and fed. Next, we have the king of Israel ordering the death of Elisha, and God delivers Samaria. That's the city of the Israelites. And now, as a result of that, as the king interacts with Elisha, he is not trying to kill him, but instead he is doing what he says and honoring him. And there is that widow from Shunem. Remember her? The one with the son. Um, and she's catching up on her story because things had gotten bad in Israel for a while. She had actually left and gone down to the land of the Philistines. She'd consulted with Elisha first, and he said, "Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead and do that." And now she's come back. And of course, when you leave your land, somebody else is able to take it. So she left her land, and now she comes back. And the king of Israel uh, just wants to hear her story, and here's the story of the healings and the miracles. And oh, by the way, my land, it's like it got, picked up by some others, and he restores the land to her. Again, at the prodding of Elisha. So it's taking all the threads of a number of different stories and bringing them together. And so that takes place when Aram has laid a siege against Samaria. All of those things have taken place. That's sort of the backdrop. We already saw that. And now a new story that we haven't talked about yet. Back in Aram, Ben-Hadad, that's the name of the king. Notice it's just been, so far we've just been calling him the king of Aram. But now we're back to referring to him by name because this is going to be politically significant. He's sick. And Hazael, who is his chief of staff, notice we don't read any more of Haman. Haman, like what happened to him, I don't know. But now it's Hazael who's sent to inquire from Elisha, and they're not hunting for him to kill him anymore because when you're sick, and I don't know if he's thinking about a deathbed confession. I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Well, I know how it's going to turn out, but Hazael is sent to inquire from Elisha, and the question is, will Ben-Hadad get better, or will he? Is this sickness unto death? What's going to happen here? And Elisha says, why don't you tell him what he wants to hear? Things are going to get better. Well, what do you mean by that? And Elisha, as he's talking to Hazael, he begins to weep. And he says, what are you weeping for? I'm foreseeing all the things that you, when you become king, are going to be doing against Israel. And he says, what do you mean when I become king? I'm not in line to become king. I serve the king. And Elisha says, well, you have been serving the king, but you're going to become king. And you're going to replace Ben-Hadad. And Hazael says, oh, okay, well, I guess I can make that happen like now. and it takes place. So here's the story, chapter 8, verse 7. Then Elisha came to Damascus. Notice this isn't long distance. He actually shows up there. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick, and it was told him, saying, the man of God has come here. So Elisha's in Damascus for this part of the story. And Hazael, and we actually have a statue of him because, like I said, he is going to become king. And so Ben-Hadad sends Hazael to confer with Elisha, and the question, will Ben-Hadad recover from his illness? Like I said, we'll tell him yes, but really no. And Elisha weeps, and now he said he weeps because Hazael will be a king and a scourge against Israel. He's going to do some bad things against Israel. Israel is going to get a lot smaller while Hazael is around. And so Hazael goes back the next day, and I've consulted with Elisha, and here's what's going to happen. And as he talks to him, he kills him and takes over now successfully, leads a coup, and takes over now as the new king of Aram at Damascus. So verse 16, now in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat being then the king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, became king. So this is the passing of Jehoshaphat, and now his son, Jehoram, notice he was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab became his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. So I have to notice he is still Jehoram. Um, and he had taken the daughter of Ahab as his wife. Now I've got to place that out. Notice I have Ahab in the middle of this, son of Omri. And Ahab had taken Jezebel as his wife, who was a Phoenician princess, and they had had 3 kids, and 2 of those had reigned. Ahaziah and then Joram had reigned. But this is Jehoram. Now the names are going to, they're so much alike, they're actually going to be replaceable. So watch out. You always have to ask which Joram and which Jehoram. Is this Israel, or is this Judah? And over on the right, we're seeing Asa and Jehoshaphat and Jehoram. Those are the kings of Judah. But now the king of Judah takes for himself a wife who is the daughter of the king of Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, um, and also the daughter of a Phoenician, the granddaughter of a Phoenician. So, or Jezebel is a Phoenician, so we would say the daughter of a Phoenician as well, who is bringing with her not just bad ways of worship, but bad gods to worship. Baal and paganism is now entering into not Israel, not the northern kingdom of Israel, but now into Judah. So, even in spite of that, the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah for the sake of David, his servant, since he had promised him to give a lamp to him through his sons always. And so, even though Judah is going really, really, really bad, God says, I'm not going to destroy them. I'm going to save a remnant. I'm going to bring it around because I promised David that there would be a king. And so, Judah still remains at this point in the story. So Joram, we called him Jehoram before, but it's the same person. Joram, and notice I've got 2 Jorams, and that's why we were calling the one Jehoram. I think that's why the text did it earlier. But this is Joram, the king of Judah, slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. So this is Joram, the son of Jehoshaphat, and Ahaziah, his son, became king in his place. So now we have Ahaziah, who is king of Judah, but his mother is the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, and so his grandfather is a Phoenician king. You can see how things are getting sort of messy here. This is Ahaziah, walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab had done, because he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Notice that connection going all the way back to Ahab. Then he went with Joram. The he here is Ahaziah. What's happened is Hazael, king of Aram, has come down against the Israelites at Ramoth Gilead. So the he is Ahaziah, went with Joram, the son of Ahab, and after all, their uncle and nephew. They go with the son of Ahab to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. And they are going to meet here, and they're going to fight. And in the fighting, notice the Arameans wounded Joram. Which Joram? This is Joram of Israel. Joram of Judah is already dead. So Joram is going to get wounded, and he's going to retreat from the battle. And so King Joram returned to be healed in Jezreel. Jezreel is both a city, remember that's the valley of Jezreel, but there's also a city by that name. And so he goes back to Jezreel to be healed of the wounds which the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramah when he fought against Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, notice how we keep coming back and forth with the different pronunciations. Blame it on the Hebrew text. They do it there as well. But the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel because he was sick. And so you have 2 kings gathered at Jezreel. Now, it's going to get thornier. So Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, gird up your loins and take this flask of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. Now you say, well, who's in Ramoth Gilead? Neither one of the kings are there, but the army is still there. So they're still at Ramoth Gilead contesting the coming of Hazael and Damascus. And Elisha gives some instructions now. He's defined this prophet that he's sending is to find Jehu. Jehu is one of the captains in the Israelite army, and he is to go to him and take him into a private room, and there he will anoint him as the new king of Israel. Now, what happens in private doesn't always stay in private, so it's not long, what's going to happen. He's going to displace all the descendants of Ahab, and it's to be done in private, but the news is quickly going to get out. Sure enough, Jehu is acclaimed king of Israel by the other soldiers who they ask him, "What happened in that room?" And he says, "Haven't you figured it out?" And they saw the prophet. Maybe they saw the oil. Maybe he tells them. I think that's really what it is. And they acclaim him, and so he rides by chariot to Jezreel because the current king of Israel hasn't heard about that, and he's going to tell him rather forcefully. In fact, as he gets there, they look out the wall and they say, "Here comes somebody by chariot. Man, he looks like a crazy driver. That looks like Jehu's driving." And they actually recognize it from his driving. He was sort of a wild and crazy guy. And so he comes up against the king of Israel and shoots Joram, and actually has to chase him for a bit, and he makes it to the vineyard of Naboth. Remember the vineyard of Naboth? Naboth had been the one who was unjustly put to death by Jezebel, the wife of Ahab, and because of that, the whole family has been cursed. Ahab had repented, so he was allowed to die just like normally. But now we're coming to where the books are going to be balanced, and Joram is killed, shot in the vineyard of Naboth, and he also shoots Ahaziah. Chases him and shoots him. Now, it's not a clean shot, so Ahaziah is wounded, and he makes it across to Megiddo, where he dies. But he has died as well. And so Jehu now comes back, and Jezebel is standing at a window. Who do you think you are? And they throw her out the window, and she dies. Jehu actually goes in and has lunch, and he comes out, like, okay, we're going to bury her. And meanwhile, the dogs have just eaten the body. It's like been thoroughly desecrated. And so Jezebel has a really ignoble ending. And now Jehu sends a challenge to the 70 sons of Ahab in Samaria. And Jezebel didn't have all of those children. He's had a number of wives, and so the entire extended family. And the sons of Ahab say, "Hey, we're willing to accept your leadership. You win, we lost, we're out, you're in." But he doesn't want them to change their mind, so he orders their death. And the elders of Samaria send Jehu the heads of the 70 sons. And so there's a clean sweep. All of the descendants, all of the family of Ahab and Jezebel are killed. Next, Jehu says, "Okay, I'm the new king, and you guys have been worshiping Baal. Let's have Baal Day." He calls for a Baal festival. And here's the pronouncement. We actually have it. Ahab served Baal a little. Jehu will serve him much. And the priests of Baal are thinking, cool, there's been people that kept wanting to worship Yahweh, the Lord, and we didn't want that. We're servants of Baal. And so they all come together, and he gathers all the priests and worshipers of Baal together into a temple. And it is a ruse because now he orders everyone in the temple to be killed. And this is a way to gather them together and then off with their head, and they're all done. Baal worship is extinguished in Israel. And so the house of Baal is turned into a latrine. And there's a name for Baal. Remember, we said this previously, that you could call him Lord of the Flies. But now they're going to turn that around, and they're going to call him Lord of the stuff that flies gather around, or Lord of stuff that you find in the latrine. Just use your imagination there. So Jehu eradicated Baal out of Israel. However, verse 29, however, as for the sins of Jeroboam, remember Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. From these Jehu did not depart, specifically the golden calves that were at Bethel and were at Dan. You say, well, that's idol worship too. Yes, it is. That's not worshiping a pagan god. You say, I thought they were worshiping golden calves. Yes, they were using the golden calves as ways to worship Yahweh. They weren't supposed to be doing that. That's still idolatry. Don't do that. Don't use idols or icons as a way of worshiping God. He said not to do that. And I say that knowing that there's actually certain branches of Christianity today, going all the way back to the year 800 AD, where they did a church council. And at this church council, they said, icons are okay. Let's use icons to worship God. Let me just say, church councils can be wrong. And I think they were. Based upon a whole bunch of passages, including this one. They weren't supposed to be doing that. That's not something that had been sanctioned by God. So don't use idols, icons, images, statues, paintings as a way of worshiping God. Don't do that. Now, chapter 10, verse 32. In those days, the Lord began to cut off portions from Israel. And Hazael, that's the king of Damascus, defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, from the Jordan eastward, all the lands of Gilead. And it goes on from there to describe the specifics. We're not going to do that. But Gilead now becomes property of Aram, of Damascus. And Israel's they just lost a good chunk of their territory. They became smaller in the process. It's around this time, maybe a little bit later, but still within the life of Jehu, that we have found this obelisk known as the Black Obelisk. I guess you got that name because of its color. It was found by Austin Henry Layard back in the 1800s, 1846, and they shipped it. If I remember correctly, the ship almost sank. It was sort of a dangerous thing, but they brought it back, and it's in London today in the British Museum, and it is commemorating Shalmaneser III, who becomes king of Assyria. Now, we haven't talked much about Assyria so far. They're on the horizon. They are there. And at this point in the story, they're the superpower, whether you realize it or not. Ahab had fought against them. That battle is not mentioned in the Bible. He had been part of a whole coalition of a number of different nations that had fought against the Assyrians. And it's like, how did that go? It didn't go terrible, but it didn't go great. It was sort of in the middle. And Shalmaneser III, right now, at this point in history, was king of Assyria. And on this obelisk, it lists the military campaigns and tributes paid by littler kings around the Middle East. And one of them that it depicts is Jehu. There's a panel regarding Jehu. Let's look at that. You can see the panels. They look like little comic book panels, don't they? One of them shows Jehu coming before Shalmaneser III and bowing down before him as if to say, yes, I'm king of Israel, but you're a much bigger king, and I'm bringing you tribute, and I'm paying you not to come and beat up on us, and can you take care of us? And so Jehu is a king, but I don't want to call him a puppet king. He really is a king, but he's a king subservient to a much bigger king in the Middle East. Now, Jehu then had not only ended the third dynasty of the northern kingdom of Israel. There's been three dynasties and a few that didn't really fit into any dynasty. Three different ruling families, each of which has now been killed. But also he's killed the king of Judah as well, Ahaziah, who was king of Judah. He's out now, but that leaves the queen mother, Athaliah, and she's still alive. And now there's going to be bad stuff that happens because she is a worshiper of Baal. And so when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she rose and destroyed all the royal offspring. She kills all of the descendants of Ahaziah. Now, there probably were a number of different wives involved there, but they're all his offspring. What is going on here? This is her, I guess you could describe it, her grandchildren. And yet she wants nothing to do with Jewish people, with people of whether they're from Israel or Judah. And so we have Athaliah now, because Jehu had killed Ahaziah, and he'd killed the other, he'd killed Joram as well. But Athaliah now takes all of the royal offspring. She messes one. The one she messes is little tiny baby Joash. And so we read, but Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons who were being put to death, and placed him and his nurse in the bedroom. So they hid him from Athaliah, and he was not put to death. And little Joash is going to be taken and hidden in the one place that she wouldn't think, that nobody would think to look. He's going to be hidden with her in the house of the Lord. 6 years. So he's just a baby. He's, maybe a year old or so. He's going to be hidden for 6 years while Athaliah was reigning over Israel. And at the end of that time, we have little tiny Joash. After 7 years, he's brought out of hiding, and they're going to acclaim him king of Judah. And as they do this, Athaliah she's gonna, she wants no part. She wants no king of Judah. She's reigning, and she is killed when she objects. And so Judah comes that close, within one life, of having the entire ruling clan, of having the Davidic line destroyed. And she's killed. And now Jehoiada, the high priest, will oversee the rule of Joash, because Joash, he's about 7 years old now. And that's not really old enough to make a lot of decisions. And so Jehoiada, the high priest, is helping him, at least for the time being. And he leads the nation into making a covenant with the Lord, really ratifying the old covenant, but they do it by affirming a covenant. And we're going to follow the Lord, which is what they should have been doing all along, but they'd gotten away from that. And so Baal worship is rooted out. That's no longer going to be a thing. Now, there still will be high places, but that's supposed to be worshiping God. Of course, they shouldn't be doing it there. They should be doing it in the temple, but still, at least Baal worship is rooted out. And so we read chapter 12, verse 1, in the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. It's going to be a good long reign. And his mother's name was Zebiah of Beersheba. And so notice we have Joash, but he's also called Jehoash. Same person. We didn't change kings. Again, it's sort of like Daniel and Danny, or Johnny, John, and Jonathan. And by the way, I've been called all three. My name is John, but I've actually had friends that sort of changed it to Jonathan, and that's okay. I wasn't bothered by that. The same thing happens here. Now, we have then Jehu ruling the northern kingdom of Israel, but now we have Joash, or Jehoash, however you want to pronounce it or write it, is going to be ruling in the kingdom of Judah. Now we go back to Hazael. Remember him from Damascus? Hazael, king of Aram, went up and fought against Gath. Now Gath is on the other side. You have to go through Israel to even get there. Gath is a Philistine city. And he fights against it and captured it. And Hazael set his face to go up to Jerusalem. He's going to try to take out Judah. Now you say, well, what about Israel? I think Israel and him had made peace for a time. And he's going to go up to take Jerusalem with the intent of taking Judah out. And Jehoash, king of Judah, took all of the sacred things that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah, his fathers, king of Judah, had dedicated. Over the years, they've built up the temple. They've got holy, things that are set apart for worship, and his own sacred things, and all the gold that was found among the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the king's house, and sent them to Hazael, king of Aram. And then he went away from Jerusalem. In other words, they bought him off. They took everything that wasn't nailed down from the palace, from the temple, from everything, and they paid him this giant bribe. And that's what Hazael wanted. He wanted the money. Show me the money. And he took it and he left. So Jehoash has to has to pay a bribe, blackmail money, to keep his throne. His servants then, and maybe this is in response to what he had just done, his servants arose and made a conspiracy and struck down Joash. Now this is after reigning for 40 years, but still, he struck down at the house of Millo as he was going down to Selah. These are all places in and around Jerusalem. For Jazakar, the son of Shamit, and Jehozabad, the son of Shomer, his servants, struck him, and he died, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. And Amaziah, his son, became king in his place. So we have another passing of the guard, but 40 years have passed. So we had Jehoash, but now we have Amaziah now on the throne, and time is passing. David Dorsey points out the pattern in which this has all been taking place. Going back, and we've already covered these things, where Hazael had been anointed king of Aram. Remember, who had killed Ben-Hadad. It started with Ben-Hadad being ill unto death. And then you had Jehoram of Judah. Now, we skipped over this. We didn't talk about this, but his chariots had fought against Edom. But they lost the war, and there were some military defeats, and Edom was perpetually in revolt after that. It was brief mention. You didn't have a lot that was told about that. Then we saw Ahaziah of Judah with the introduction of his mother, Athaliah, and we just talked about what happened to her. Jehu's coup and the fall of the family of Omri was a pivotal point in all of this. But then we saw just now Joash of Judah, his rise, the 7-year-old with Athaliah's, how she had tried to put the family to death, but now he comes on the scene. Next, we have Jehoahaz of Israel, where his chariots are reduced now because of Aram. He's only got 10 chariots left in his army. We're reading about kingdoms with, 600 chariots and 800 chariots. He's got 10. And so he's suffering military defeats at the hands of Aram. And finally, where I want to go now is Jehoash of Israel is going to defeat Hazael. It's going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And the story begins with Elisha, who was ill unto death. Notice we started with Ben-Hadad, sick and about to die. Now it's Elisha himself. He's old, and because age does catch up with you. And so he's now going to die. But before he does, he's going to give one last prophecy. Let's look at that. When Elisha became sick with illness, of which he was going to die, and so we're told that, Joash the king of Israel came down to him and wept over him and said, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." He may only have 10 chariots left, but Elisha had been worth more than any number of chariots, because Elisha had brought peace and safety and salvation at different points along the way to the northern kingdom of Israel, and he recognizes that. So Elisha said to him, "Take a bow and arrows." And so he does that. He takes a bow and some arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, "Put your hand on the bow." And he put his hand on it. And then Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. It's like, I'm putting my prophetic power on you just for this action. Verse 17, he said, "Open the window toward the east." And he opened it. Then Elisha said, "Shoot." And he shot. And he said, "The Lord's arrow of victory, even the arrow of victory over Aram, for you will defeat the Arameans at Aphek until you have destroyed them." You're going to win. I'm not going to live to see it, but you're going to live to see a victory. Then he said, "Take the arrows," and he took them, and he said to the king of Israel, "Strike the ground." And he struck the ground 3 times and stopped. So the man of God was angry with him and said, "You should have struck it 5 or 6 times. And then you would have struck Aram until you would have destroyed it. Every time you struck the ground, you were going to win a victory. But now you shall strike Aram only 3 times." You didn't, and I take it, strike the ground. That was like, don't do it once, do it a bunch of times. But he limited his success by limiting his endeavor as he acted it out. Well, Elisha died, and so he's done. And they buried him, but even in his death, something's going to happen. Notice, now the bands of the Moabites would invade the land in the spring of the year. And I mean, this had become a seasonal thing, because then, after the invasion, they would just run back. It's not a stand-up battle. They just run in, grab whatever they could, sort of like ruffians. Verse 21, as they were burying a man, behold, they saw a marauding band, and they cast the man into the grave of Elisha. They're just doing, somebody's died, and they're getting ready for burial, and all of a sudden, here come the Moabites. Quick, save yourself. They don't have time to finish the burial, so they just throw him into the grave of Elisha. And when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up on his feet. I mean, one last miracle from the grave. And so let's close then by just looking at Elisha, but also looking at Jesus, because he has been, there's a sense in which we've been seeing Jesus and stories that remind us of Jesus all throughout the ministry of Elisha, where his name means God is salvation, and the name Jesus, Yahweh, will save. where the ministry of Elisha begins with at the Jordan when Elijah himself had been taken to heaven. So it begins at the Jordan. Remember where the ministry of Jesus begins? At the Jordan with his baptism in the Jordan River. With Elisha, he had raised the son of the Shunammite woman from the dead. Jesus raised the son of the widow of Nain from the dead. Elisha fed a crowd of men with barley loaves. Jesus had fed 5,000 men with 5 loaves and 2 fish, and then later on did it again with 4 loaves and a bunch of fish, or 7 loaves, I'm sorry. Elisha provided oil to supernaturally extend the home of the widow. Remember that story? Jesus turned water into wine at a wedding, supernaturally extended that. Uh, Elisha healed Naaman of his leprosy. Jesus healed a bunch of lepers, a great number of lepers. Elisha caused a lost axe head to float. Jesus caused Peter to float. Remember to walk on water? The sinking Peter. Talk about an axe head. That's an actual person. Elisha had an unfaithful disciple in Gehazi. Jesus had an unfaithful disciple in Judas Iscariot. Elisha caused the enemies of Israel to be blinded, and then he restored their sight. Jesus restored the sight of a whole bunch of people and gave spiritual sight to all who believe in him. Elisha's tomb became a place of resurrection when a body was thrown into his tomb. Jesus becomes our place of resurrection because he rose from the dead and he became the promise of our own resurrection. Believe in him, he who believes in me. How did he put it in John chapter 11? Will never die, will live forever. Have you trusted not in Elisha, but in Jesus, the one who is greater than Elisha?